Let's head down to Miami, of course, also on Saturday, December 30th, the Capital One Orange Bowl between Georgia and Florida State. One team that belonged in the playoff versus another team that belonged in the playoff. Two very different caliber of football team, considering Jordan Travis's injury to Florida State. We talk about motivation, Steven. This is a 14-point spread. I was told, had this been a playoff game, a real football game, and not just a bowl game, that it would have been even bigger, 14.5, 15 points. I think some of that is where's Georgia's head at on this. A lot of players leaving the roster. Carson Beck is, of course, coming back to the team, but there's a lot of 4- and 5-star kids who have left Georgia's team because, again, that's just what happens when you're that good and you're that loaded. But it's hard to make out what the matchups are. So many NFL players for both of these teams probably not going to play. So I don't. It's basically like whose backups are better at this point. And again, this is an Orange Bowl. This is a New Year's Six bowl, and it's just very hard to tell anything about the matchups between these two teams other than Georgia elite recruiting, Florida State not playing with best player.
On paper, it sounds great, right? Like Florida State versus Georgia.
Undefeated.
Yeah, it sounds like a great game, and I hope it is. But honestly, I think both these teams are probably pretty disappointed to be in this game, and I have no idea what to expect. Now, we have seen it in this kind of scenario work out before, where the team that was a huge underdog kind of could show up and win just because Georgia was the number one team. They got knocked out. Now, obviously, we know Florida State, the situation with them.
Florida State's been on the other end of that in a Group of Six bowl in a New Year's Six bowl. Like, didn't they lose? Was it UCF that beat them the year
Houston.
Houston. That's right. Houston beat them. And that's, again, I don't think that's an anti-FSU stance. I think that is who was motivated to be there.
Exactly. I guess we could call this the third CFP playoff game for the season. It would be nice to have both teams at full strength, playing at full energy, because it'd be a terrific matchup. But putting all that aside, one thing that stood out to me is just fascinating is that these two teams have not met in a regular season game since 1965. It just feels like Florida State and Georgia should play a lot more.
Good stuff.
But that here we are. It's so it's been a while. The last two meetings were in bowl games, but last regular season meeting in 1965. So saying all that about this matchup, it's basically who's available. And I think if you're Georgia, you got Carson Beck. You already have a big advantage over Florida State. Florida State should have Tate Rodemaker back, and I think Brock Glenn, Rodemaker, full month to get ready. They'll probably play better than they did late in the season. But so many guys for Florida State, whether it's Trey Benson, Jaheim Bell, Johnny Wilson, Jared Verse, all opting out. We'll see who Georgia ends up with. But I think given the fact that Florida State is still shorthanded at quarterback, I still think Georgia with Carson Beck just finds a way to win here. So regardless of motivation for Florida State here, I just think Georgia just has too much.
Well, and Georgia may not be interested in this game. And again, when people say that, when I say it, when media say it, as a part of the analysis, all it takes is like 5 to 8 to 10% less focus. It doesn't mean you don't care, like you don't show up. Like, you still are trying to win the game. But in a game like this, with this highest stakes against a high quality foe like this, it only takes a small percentage point of lack of focus or lack of motivation. To win this game by 14, Georgia needs to play 100%. And if you play at 90%, Florida State can beat you. So what's fascinating for me is there's so many young players for Georgia that are going to be really fighting for like Kirby Smart's love and attention. It's like Kirby. If I'm Kirby Smart, that is what I'm playing here. I'm playing the who wants to be a dog, like not literally a Georgia Bulldog, but like, who are my dogs and who wants to be a dog next year on this football team? Who wants to start? A lot of players who were banged up at the end of the season that, had they been healthy, maybe the outcome of the Alabama game was different. Like, I don't know. Like, there's just that they have too much depth and too much talent. And Kirby is too good at this stuff that it feels like they will, while sure, they might be out partying on South Beach a little too much.
Both teams probably.
Which we know affects the outcome of bowl games. For a fact, history has shown us this for years, decades. All it takes is one extra shot of tequila on South Beach to like play at 82% instead of 92%, and that might get you beat. And Florida State, again, if I'm Mike Norvell, it should not be hard to. I don't know. I'm with you. They're both disappointed, but if I'm Florida State, who is actively again trying to seek to get out of the ACC, which they're not going to be able to do, I don't. It should not be hard to motivate the Seminoles. It shouldn't be hard.
It shouldn't be hard, but I think it's also fair to wonder when you're missing your best pass rusher, your best running back, one of your best pass catchers. I don't think Keon Coleman has officially declared one way or the other as we're recording this whether he's going to play or not. But I guess you get my point. Is that
sure, Florida
shell.
State,
yeah, I mean Florida State was already going to be an underdog if they played
right.
Georgia at full strength, and now you're taking away 5.
Oh no, I'm picking.
Players, so.
I'm picking Georgia. I'm just saying.
I too.
I'm just saying, if I'm Mike Norvell, it shouldn't be hard.
Sure.
Look at what college football did to you. Look at what the committee did to you. Look at all the press. Look at all the coverage. Look at all the talk. And Georgia, of course, I actually think Georgia's the team that should be most pissed off about not being in the playoff. We've talked about it a lot, but like that's a harder ask, I think, of Georgia than it is for Florida State. They kind of have dealt with the lack of their quarterback for a couple of like weeks and weeks and weeks now. So I think they're a little bit more prepared for that sort of environment, but I don't think they're good enough to beat Georgia, so I'll take the Dogs. But should not be hard for Mike Norvell to motivate the Seminoles in this matchup. That is for sure.